her dying patients will ask her to call their estranged adult children who have gone no contact. And when my team saw one of her videos, we, wanted her to join us in this conversation. Here's a quick look.
What's going on, dudes? It's your boy Andy Matrix. I'm back on Angry Guy's YouTube channel, and I'm sure you have heard the phrase, karma is a bitch. Well, it looks like the baby boomers are getting what has been waiting on them for decades. The boomers were one of the first groups of people to normalize kicking your kids out at the age of 18. In other cultures, it is normal for kids to live with their parents, wait into adulthood until they get married. However, the boomers had a better idea. The boomers thought it was a great idea for kids to leave the house with no work experience, no knowledge, no training, absolutely no support. Man, it must be good to be privileged. So we're going to be talking about how, the boomers' children, I believe it's millennials, Gen X, millennials, and I think some of Gen Z, if I'm not mistaken, right? They are leaving boomers behind. Boomers are asking for help at an old age because they're running out of social security checks and checks and money from the government. So now they're hoping that the kids that they abandon will take care of them in their old age. Man, I wonder how this is going to turn out. Guys, if you haven't heard of me, it's your boy Andy Matrix. Make sure to like this video. Make sure to comment below. Okay, and make sure to check out my YouTube channel, Andy Matrix Gaming. Okay, I talk about anime, gaming, Japanese culture, and a whole bunch of other stuff on social issues. And if you're interested in any of those things, make sure to click the link in the description. I greatly appreciate it. And guys, make sure to follow Angry Guy on Rumble, for he's making content on Rumble that's not allowed on YouTube. So if you want some of that cool stuff, click the link in the description, follow him on Rumble. And also, guys, it's hard times. Hard times are here. The economy's going down. There's millions and millions of layoffs. People are losing their jobs and they're forced to do gig work. And a lot of people are going homeless, being out of work and all that. A lot of people are suffering. A lot of people are struggling. And this is why Angry Guy created the Angry Content Creator Academy. As they're being pushed, to basically being unemployed, you're gonna have to fend for yourself. Create your own side gig. And what better way to be self-employed and get rid of the 9 to 5 than to be a content creator, or really just to start an online business. So click the link in the description. Check out Angry Guy's Content Creator Academy to learn more. Right now, let's get on with the show. So the baby boomers, man, I gotta tell you, the baby boomers are something special. They are something special. And now they are on Oprah. They are on Oprah. Now, I want you to keep in mind that Oprah is a boomer herself. And basically, she's kind of pretending to take the side. Basically, she's pretending to be neutral. But at the end of the day, Oprah is catering to her own demographics. Right? She's catering to her own demographics. She's a boomer, and her audience are boomers. Right? So she's kind of telling the younger people, hey, take care of the old folks. Well, if only you knew what the old folks did to their own kids. Anyways, let's go ahead and take a look. Here we go.
Her dying patients will ask her to call their estranged adult children who have gone no contact. And when my team saw one of her videos, we, wanted her to join us in this conversation. Here's a quick look.
If you're the type of person who continues to see no contact with your dying family member, even after I, as a hospice nurse, call you and say that is their final dying wish to talk to you, then I think that's totally fine. I don't judge you, and I don't think you owe people who abused you peace. I don't mind being the bad guy and telling them no. I'll even update you when they pass if you ask me to and be your shoulder to cry on. And if all you feel is relief, that's totally normal too, and you're not a bad person.
When I first heard your story and I hadn't seen you on TikTok, I was like, wow, what an interesting thing. You're putting these estranged children with their dying parents, but it's not that at all. In most
Not
cases,
always.
in most cases, they don't, right? They say no. I don't want to see them.
They do in most cases, but it's difficult. I've had conversations before where they say, "What should I do?" And they asked me, and that's very difficult. When I became a hospice nurse 10 years ago, I was not estranged from my own biological father. And about 7 years ago, I did become estranged from him. So I really began to understand more how those children are and what they're feeling whenever they're getting that phone call.
Wow. And so what do you find when the people who are dying ask to see their children? Are they asking to see their children, their estranged adult children, because they want to apologize, because they have regrets, because they want to have final words?
I don't believe personally that they usually want to apologize because they're telling me, do they know that I'm dying? It almost feels like a guilt trip to me. Like, please tell them that I'm dying and maybe they'll talk to me.
The real reason why Oprah Winfrey did this podcast to open up a conversation about why so many adults are going no contact with their parents. This is just my opinion, because Oprah, I feel, is not on the victim side. She plays like she is. She's doing the passive aggressive thing. She's straddling the fence and playing both sides, but she's really for the abusive parents, okay? Baby boomer generation. My mother and father, your mother and father. Hey, Oprah Winfrey is also a baby boomer. Keep that in mind. But I feel the reason why she really did this podcast was not to support the victims, because there was a lot that could have been said in this podcast. There was really no emphasis on narcissistic abuse. They danced around it. They really tried to avoid that word narcissist, because that's all this is. Mom and dad are narcissists, and they have no empathy, no emotional connection to their children, and they're very entitled. That's most of the boomer generation. But Oprah, I feel that she did this podcast and tried to play like she was not showing favoritism to either sides, but low key, if you can read body language and listen to the tone of her voice throughout this podcast, she is for the baby boomers. And what's happening right now in this nation, the boomer generation is old. They're in their 70s and 80s, which means they need somebody to take care of them because they're becoming sick and old and helpless. And they know deep in their heart they did their children dirty. And because we have the internet and social media, and all of us that were abused are coming forward, and we are now exposing our families for doing this, the boomer generation, they are crashing out and spiraling. They are panicking. And the government is taking away, allegedly, because I did 2 videos on this last year. I already talked about this. They're going to lose their Medicaid. How are their medical bills, their nursing bills? How is all that getting paid? Unless they move in with their adult children and their adult children take care of them, which they will not, because y'all abused us. Now you need us to fucking wipe your ass and push you around in the fucking wheelchair because you won't be able to afford the nursing home. That's what this is about. Oprah's trying to facilitate a situation where we feel guilty for cutting off our parents because they need us. They're getting old. They just want to keep fucking using us. They don't want to get back with us because they love us and they're truly sorry. They want to use us some more because they need our assistance. They need us to help pay their bills, their medical bills, their living expenses, go grocery shopping. They need us. And now they're realizing they've done us so dirty and they don't know how to come back from it. And they're not really apologetic. They just still need to have access to their adult children to use us some more. You watch that clip That young lady, that nurse, she said it. Those patients that are old and they're dying, they're on their deathbed, they try to guilt trip their adult children one last time. And what happens? The nurse says, hey, your child doesn't want to see you, which means the abuse was really bad. The nurse will explain to the dying patient, your child, I reached out to your child. They said they don't want to talk to you. I can offer you, if you want to write a letter, I will give it to your child when you pass away. What happens? That dying elderly person says, no, I ain't writing no letter. Yeah, because it was all about manipulation. You're not really sorry. You tried to guilt trip your child. You wanted your child to see you dying on your deathbed to still continue to have some form of control, even when you're dying and going out. That's how manipulative the narcissistic baby boomers are. They continue to manipulate and abuse their children, even from the grave. That's why Oprah is trying. She's repping her generation and trying to help her generation regain control of the adult children that cut them off, because they're getting old and they need us. They need us, and they know they fucked up. It's so far gone, they don't know what to do. They're spiraling, and they know they're going to lose their Medicaid and everything. They'll do everything except take their ass to therapy and apologize and get themselves together and straighten up for their children. That's why I say, y'all, I don't feel bad. When they on their dying bed, they still manipulating, they still playing psychological games. It's not to be trusted. And I don't blame the adult child for not wanting to go visit their dying parent. They was right. Listen to the nurse in that clip. Go re-listen to that clip. The nurse offered the dying elderly person, you can write a letter, I will give it to your child. Tell your child you're sorry in the letter and you really love them. No, the pride, the ego of a narcissist will not allow them to bow down to their fucking child who they know they fucking abused and did dirty. That's why they die miserable and alone. Fuck them.
Guys, the baby boomers are afraid that Donald Trump is taking away their Social Security benefits, Medicaid, and a whole bunch of other benefits, and the economy as he's forcing people into homelessness, and basically, it's getting harder and harder to find another jobs as there's like no more jobs. Jesus Christ, as we are being replaced with robots and artificial intelligence. And when it gets really, really hard to find a job, what other choice do we have but to start our own side hustles, right? Our own businesses, one way or another. This is why Angry Guy created the Angry Content Creator Academy, where you can learn how to start your own online business, learn how to create content, build an audience on the internet, and create a digital product that's going to help you, generate an income and say goodbye to the 9-to-5. So guys, click the link in the description. Check out the Angry Guy Content Creator Academy. If you sign up today, you get a free guide, and click the link in the description. Go ahead and check it out. Now, let's get back to the video. So basically, to sum up what the lady said, the baby boomers, they're in their 70s and 80s, and they're getting older and older, and they know that they're going to pass away soon. And they see that Donald Trump, the Trumpity Trump, is taking away so many benefits, food stamps, SNAP benefits, Social Security. He's going to decrease Social Security. And I think Medicaid, Medicaid, he's cutting back on Medicaid. So a lot of baby boomers are not going to get, as much of the care as they need, right? And as the government is no longer going to be taking care of these people, they're getting nervous and they're like, oh my God, who's going to take care of me? Who's going to take care of me? Gee, I know. What about those damn kids that I abused and kicked out of the house at the age of 18? Let me give them a call and see if they're still willing to take more abuse and deal with my narcissism. That's basically what's happening. That's essentially what's happening. Right? And Oprah, you know what I think it is? I think Oprah, many of her boomer friends were like, hey, our kids are going no contact with us. They're not communicating with us. I wonder why. Can you do an episode about this? And Oprah was like, yeah, sure, I'll do anything for my audience. Right? Oh man. I mean, it's so obvious. It's so obvious. And you know something? You know something? While Oprah is encouraging people, she's encouraging millennials and Gen Z and Gen X to like to not cut off their parents, right? To not gonna, oh, don't do that. They're family, blah blah blah. Meanwhile, Oprah herself has cut off family members. I mean, you got to remember, Oprah's a billionaire. Oprah is a billionaire. I'm talking about like billions with a B. You know what I'm saying? Right? Billions with a freaking B. But she's telling you, hey, you gotta you gotta go back and take care of your narcissistic parents, even though they didn't raise you, even though they didn't feed you, even though they were abusive, even though they kicked you out of the house at the age of 18 with no preparations. Yeah, you gotta go back. You gotta go back and deal with them. They're getting old. They need somebody to take care of them. I mean, seriously. Seriously. Like, how narcissistic do you have to be? How psychotic in the head do you have to be an absolute demon, to be an absolute freaking demon, and then expect your kids to take care of you? You know what I'm saying? And it's no wonder. It's no wonder. And look, I didn't grow up in America. I came into America at the age of 10 in 1999, right? I mean, I'm a millennial, but I understand exactly how these people feel. Okay. But anyways, let's go on to our next video.
Oprah's generation is more mad they don't have the freedom to treat us like the silent generation treated them, because they were waiting for when they were older. They're like, I get to act unhinged, treat my kids like shit, and I'm gonna be put on this great pedestal, because that's what they did to their parents' generation. No matter how much their parents treated them like shit, they still entertained them, they still had dinner with them, they still had conversations with them, and they entertained them until the day they died. And with all of this unhealed trauma they have from their parents, all of that aggression and beating went out on us. That's why they were putting belt to ass to kids. They would like, oh, I'm the parent. You just have to listen to me. You don't get a right to say anything. They wanted to impose their will upon their kids like their parents imposed their will upon them, because they thought that was well within their right. But when we said enough is enough, I don't give a fuck who you are. If you're my mom, you're my dad. If you disrespect me, you getting the fuck out of my life. They don't like that. And they're mad because the societal standards when they were growing up, they couldn't do that without being condemned. And now that it's acceptable in society to treat older generations that treat you like shit, to push them to the side, and they are the older generation, they're going to try and gaslight and manipulate us anyway to go back to what it was. And we're not having it. And that's why they're upset. That's why they continue to have these conversations, because they want to go back to what the silent generation did to them.
Yeah, the baby boomers make the excuse that the silent generation treated them like shit, and so it's okay for them. It's okay for them to treat their own children like crap, right? Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It seems like it never clicked to them, or maybe they never had the realization that if you treat somebody like shit, they're not gonna want to be around you, right? Those are the baby boomers, right? Maybe this logic didn't click for them, but they make that excuse, right? They make that excuse because they thought that their kids were going to tolerate their their bull crap like the silent generation did, and that's not true. Every generation is different, and like many groups of old people, it's very hard for them to accept anything new because they want things to remain the way they are. And a lot of baby boomers, they're very reluctant. They don't want to adapt to the new age. They don't want to adapt to the technological advances, the technological changes, right? Even though they helped create the American system that's currently putting us in poverty, right? They don't want to. They don't want to. They just expect people to like take their bullshit. Here, I know that I'm a jerk. I know that I'm an asshole. But hey, I raised you, so you got to deal with it. No. This generation, millennials and Gen Z, we don't do that. Okay, we don't do that. We have more common sense than you guys do. This generation has more freaking common sense. We are adapting. To the current year. We are adapting to the current year. And like the guy said, it in this day and age, it's normal to, to push the elderly aside. Like if they start to treat you like that, you can push them aside. Like a lot of people, they just will not take abuse anymore. People might have been able to accept abuse back in the day, but now, no. People are way too smart. We got the internet. People are reading articles on psychology, at the push of a button. Gen Z and millennials, we're looking up, psychological knowledge on narcissists and behavioral health and all these things, right? So it's very hard. It's harder and harder to finesse the next generation. They might as oppress us economically, but mentally, they cannot abuse us. Anyways, let's go to our next clip.
I have not listened to the Oprah podcast about the no contact thing, but I do want to say this. Of course, Oprah is minimizing and downplaying and dismissing, or I don't know what she did, but it sounds, calling it a trend to go no contact. Of course she is. And it seems counterintuitive because Oprah came out of a history of abuse. And so I know, and she's like an authority that many of us grew up with on emotions and mental health and all of that. And so that is why it's confusing. But what I want you to remember is that Oprah's audience is the boomers. Oprah's a boomer. Her audience is the boomers. So that's who's listening for the most part to her podcast. Second, Oprah herself has a questionable record of her own ability. And I am not going to blame her for Dr. Phil and Dr. Oz. I don't believe in asking women to take credit for the bad behavior of men. And there was not great stuff going on at her girls' school, and she didn't really address that, deal with that in the way that many of us would have wished that she would. She was investing in Weight Watchers back when we well knew that diet culture was deeply problematic, and that she, of all people, could have moved the needle on that quite a bit. I say this not to bash Oprah. I'm not here to tell Oprah what's right or wrong. I say this, though, to say to anyone who's having trouble, if you are no contact, if you're thinking about going no contact, if you feel guilty about going no contact, all those things that people feel, because going no contact is one of the most deeply painful, difficult decisions anyone can make. If you are struggling with that because now you have this authority figure that you have trusted for decades and decades and decades telling you that maybe that's not a good thing or it's not okay, or I don't know what she said. What I want you to remember is Oprah is not perfect. She is a boomer, and her audience is boomers. That's who she's talking to. And so my thought was, when I heard all of this, was of course, of course that would be the take. So if that is helpful, great. I know this is so painful, maybe nothing is helpful, but I did just want to put that out there that Oprah's a really complicated person, and her empathy circuits, those that are left, because I do believe we lose a lot of empathy when we get a lot of money, the empathy circuitry in her brain goes, I think, not towards, at this point, the victims or survivors of abuse in those dynamics. Perhaps I would say it that way.
So following what the lady was saying, they're calling it a trend to go no contact. And the reason why they're calling it a trend, they think it's a trend. They think, oh, they're just doing that because it's a trend on the internet. Everybody's doing it. When the trend is over, then they'll come back to us, right? Well, trauma is not exactly a trend, my friend. Trauma is not a trend. You understand? You understand that? It seems like the boomers just don't get it. The boomers just don't get it. Look, a lot of them know exactly what they did wrong. They just don't want to admit it. Okay, they don't want to admit it, and that's part of the whole, the narcissist personality, is to know that you are wrong, but refusing to acknowledge it and just expect the other person to submit to, your shitty personality, right? That's the boomer. And something that I wanted to say about Oprah. See, Wasn't Oprah one of the people that ran away to an island when, when everybody was, when the whole P. Diddy thing happened, earlier in 2025, when everybody found out that, the P. Diddy and baby oil, how people get into the industry through P. Diddy, right? And then they found out that a whole bunch of other people went to his, were going to his parties, and that Oprah was there, and that she took part of some of that, activity with children, and then she ran away on her private jet to her private island somewhere. Did we forget that? Did we forget that? That's Oprah. That's Oprah. Yeah. So, and again, Oprah is an influencer. But you know the difference between, like, let's say like a YouTube or TikTok influencer, the difference between an online influencer and a TV influencer is that a TV influencer, they kind of just do what they're told. In Oprah's case, it's like, oh, I have to cater to my audience, And in let's say a YouTuber or somebody else on TikTok, yeah, they cater to their audience, but they do it consciously. Most, I'd like to think, right? Most YouTubers do it consciously. Like, yeah, I'm gonna give my audience what they want, but I'm not gonna sell my soul. Like, I'm not gonna be irrational or like talk about something that I know is wrong, And again, like I said earlier, Oprah, she cut off some of her own family members. So how come she doesn't bring that up? With all those billions of dollars, right? All those billions of dollars that she has, she cut some people off. And isn't Oprah the person that was saying that the best revenge is success? Become successful and you get your revenge, right? Isn't she the one that said that? And look, when in the 2000s, I used to watch Oprah. Not a lot, not like the older generation, but I used to watch Oprah sometimes. And when I was into self-help, because in my early 20s, I was really into self-help, personal development, improvement. Everything from Tony Robbins, Robert Kiyosaki, all those books. I read a lot about Oprah and how successful Oprah became. So I know Oprah. I know how she is. Okay? I know she is. And she's a boomer. Okay? She's a boomer. And hey, I mean, can you blame her? She's just catering to her audience, but we're not going to fall for it. Okay? We are just not going to fall for it. Millennials and Gen Z, we are just way too smart for these people. Right? They might have been able, you know what I think it is? I think that the boomers got finessed and abused by the silent generation. And they thought that they could do the same thing to their kids, but they never figured out that, technology would advance and information, the information age we are able to override a lot of these things. You know what I mean? Perhaps I'm not explaining myself very good here, but we have psychology, right? We have the internet. Millennials and Gen Z, we know psychology, bro. We're not going to let the boomers just finesse us like this and manipulate us like this. Anyways, let's go to our next clip.
Oh, hey besties. So Oprah decided to get involved, to chime in, if you will, on the no contact trend. And I got some 2 cents to share about that. I'm not going to watch the episode because first, I don't have time, but second, the title alone was triggering because trending, fuck you. But I've seen some updates, okay? And here's the deal. Is it trending the way that these estranged parents and boomers think it is? No. But is it trending because of social media? Sort of. Let me explain. Here's the deal, right? When I was young, I didn't have this community, right? I didn't have a social media community to lean into, an internet community to lean into, right? So I didn't know. I had no awareness that no longer talking to your family and cutting off toxic family members was even an option, was even something that a person could do, because you spend a life being told your feelings don't matter, your opinion doesn't matter, that you don't have a say, that you just have to respect your elders and do what they tell you, and that's the right thing to do. And you don't know that there is literally another choice. And then something beautiful like the internet shows up, right? And TikTok, and we're connected. And now I can see peers that have made brave choices to cut people off that are toxic, right? And I can see that they no longer tolerate that type of abuse, and that they find peace and freedom and flexibility and self-worth, and their mental health is so much better after they cut off these toxic people, right, in their lives. And you get empowered. You get a sense of like, oh, I can do that too. I have that choice. I didn't know that that was a choice I could make. And so it sits in the back of your brain, right? Because now you've seen, oh, someone else did this and they found peace, but I'm not there yet, right? And then you deal with more abuse, more trauma, more bullshit, more boundary violations, more disrespect. And you finally get to a place where you're like, you know what? I've seen people make this choice and they come out on the other side with peace. They come out on the other side and they're better for it. And I could do that for myself too. I can make that hard choice for myself. And it's not because we don't want to resolve conflict. We have spent years trying to resolve conflict, okay? It's not because we're ghosting you and running away and just not having hard conversations. Because again, we have spent years doing that. No, it's because we have seen our collective community, right, of no contact kids making that choice and coming out on the other side positively. So now I'm empowered. I'm emboldened, if you will. I'm brave, right? So we can make that choice. And then we can come here and we can see, look, I found my peace too. And then inspire, if you will, the next person to say, I don't have to tolerate this bullshit anymore. I am better than this. I deserve better. And just because you are my parent does not give you permission to treat me like I don't matter, to treat me like I'm not valuable and my opinion, my feelings, my experiences don't matter. And that is how it is trending. And that is a point that these goddamn estranged parents and these boomers and these narcissists and these emotionally immature adults don't understand. It has nothing to do with being part of the cool kids club, right? Being trending that way, and has everything to do with feeling empowered by a generation that is finally talking about being abused, being treated poorly, and taking back their power. Sorry about that. Is that what I said? Okay. Have a nice day.
100% agree. 100% agree. And I like the part that she said that the boomers were like immature adults. But yeah, see, in previous generations, like the silent generation and the boomer generation, they would say, they would think that they would not be able to survive in the world without family. And I think back then that was true. Even back then in the days of America, right? In the days of America. But, people think, I can't cut them up because they're family and this and that. But here's the problem, man. If it's affecting your mental health, you're gonna have to do something. Because me personally, when I was growing up in my teen years and in my early 20s, I got bullied by both family and friends, right? So imagine that, bullied by both family and friends. So even after high school, I still had like so-called high school friends that were still being bullies. And I'm like, and eventually I smartened up and I woke up and I said, what the heck am I doing? Spending time with these people. What am I doing? And eventually I cut them off. And when I tell you the relief, the absolute relief I felt afterwards, it was absolutely enormous. It was so amazing. I did not understand why I did not do it before. But one of the reasons is because people are just afraid of being alone. You know what I mean? People are afraid of being alone. But I mean, you have to think about it. What price are you paying? Okay, you're paying a price for being around those people. If they're causing you mental anguish, if it's taking a toll on your mental health, right? Me, for example, I used to get socially abused. When I was 16, 17, 18, I had family members calling me virgin, making fun of me for being a virgin, right? Imagine that. Your own family making fun of you for being a virgin at that age is crazy. It's absolutely crazy, So, I mean, it's no wonder why, a lot of these millennials and Gen Zers, they cut off their boomer parents, And I think, the Gen X generation, they were not a generation that would talk about their emotions and all that stuff, right? Or psychology. But as we go into the millennials and the Gen Z, our generation, we are the ones that started talking more about, psychology, emotions, mental health, and all these other things. While previous generations like the boomers and Gen X, they kind of like, they kind of like ignore those things, right? They kind of ignore those things. So I'm really glad. I'm really glad that we are here. I'm really glad that we're covering these stories, and thanks to technology now, a lot of people are able to survive on their own. Now, granted, let's not ignore the cost of living. Let's not ignore, the cost of renting an apartment, which is really expensive. But it has, because of technology, it has been easier to survive on your own. Okay, getting internet, getting food, applying for jobs. Nowadays a lot of people cannot afford an apartment, but a lot of people are making their vehicles. They're going into van life, buying a van, turning the whole van into a little tiny apartment. Right? We had the technology to do that. I think previous generation would not be able to do that because they just didn't have the technology we have now, like like power stations, like power banks, things like that and solar panels, right? Solar panels they can put on their vehicle, things like that. But our generation is really smart. So they know how to live by themselves. They know how to live by themselves, right? And if you have to be on your own to not be around somebody that's abusive, then do it. It's better to be on the road alone than traveling with a fool. By the way, that's on the Bible. Okay, that's biblical. You know what I mean? Anyways, let's go back to our last and final clip. Here we go.
Oprah recently did a segment on whatever it is. I don't even know if she still had a show, but anyway, she did a segment and she was basically narrowing down on going no contact being a trend for younger generations, and it definitely rubbed me the wrong way. A lot of older generations like to act confused why the younger generations are not speaking to them or separating themselves from the older generations, and it's like they won't take accountability that they are the reason that the younger generations are separating themselves from dysfunction. Like, you can't heal in what is breaking you, and a lot of the older generations don't realize that they're the ones breaking the younger generations. Going no contact is not some aesthetic or some hashtag that younger generations are doing to fit in. It is literally the final act. It is the final boundary because they've tried so many things and it wasn't working. It is the final boundary. After years of being dismissed and neglected and gaslit and all of that stuff, it's the final boundary. Like, I've had enough. What frustrates me consistently is how the older generations continuously let their ego prevent them from hearing younger generations out. Like, things could be fixed. So many people would have not reached that last stage of going no contact had you dropped your ego and actually hear another perspective outside of your own. They label it as something shallow and unserious so they don't have to face what it is that the hurt that they've caused or the drama and pain that they've caused. They don't want to take the accountability. That's why they're labeling it as a trend. Oh, this is some trend that they're going through. But what they fail to realize is trends eventually end. No contact doesn't. And a lot of older people, I'm not even saying 80s, I'm talking of it could be in their 50s, 60s, I would say 50s and up. They see boundaries as being disrespectful. They see you speaking up for yourself as being disrespectful. And I feel like that's where the younger generation, older generation will refuse to meet up at. Because older generations are so stuck in their ways and they refuse to see things from other perspectives. Younger generations aren't cutting people off for aesthetic and for attention. They're cutting older generations off because they finally learned what self-respect is. That is the whole point of no contact. So, Oprah, because you always are constantly out of touch when you're speaking on stuff you aren't educated about, I suggest you do some research for real instead of having the narcissist speaking up on their experience of their children going no contact with them. How about that?
Let's make something very clear here. Let's make something very clear about this whole no contact with boomers. Okay? You know, most people want to get along with family members. Okay? Nobody wakes up in the morning and is like, you know what? I've decided I'm gonna go absolutely no contact with these people. Nobody decides that. Okay? Nobody just wakes up and makes that decision. Okay? Going no contact, going no contact with any family member, what it is the last resort. Okay? It is the absolute last resort. It means I have had enough. I've had it. I am sick and tired, and I'm not going to deal with this again. Going no contact really is self-respect. Okay? That's what it is. It's self-respect. It's self-respect. Because back then in the boomer in the generation of the boomers, I think about the 70s, 60s, whatever, right? They just see things differently. And like the girl said, they think that speaking up or like having boundaries is like disrespectful. You're being disrespectful to them or something like that, which which makes me laugh. It makes me laugh because, I mean, don't they have boundaries? Right? They have boundaries too, don't they? So they don't understand it when other people have boundaries? Were they not aware of that? You know, the boomers are an amazing generation, and not in a good way. Not in a good way, right? And I've actually saw some videos talking about how, you know, the bankers and the elites teamed up with the boomers to create, you know, the future that we have now for our generation, Gen X, you know, millennials and Gen Z. We are here because of what they did, right? We're here because of what they did. You know, they created a future, you know, basically, you know, they just say, oh, screw the next generation. The next generation is going to pay for me. They were not even thinking about their kids, bro. They were not even thinking about their kids. You know, because a lot of these boomers, one of the reasons why they had kids is to show off in public. It's like, hey, look, I am a parent. I am a mother or father. I am a functioning member of society. They care so much about how they look. They care so much about how they look. Right? That they don't even think about the other person. But anyways, enough of that. Guys, if you found this video, if you like this video, if you like what I had to say today, if you find this topic entertaining and useful for your everyday, make sure to comment below, like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for future notifications. Subscribe to Angry Guy, guys, you know? I actually enjoy making these videos. These are really fun. So subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next video. It's your boy, Andy Matrix. Godspeed, baby.